Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review of the anime Your Lie in April. And I kind of enjoyed this anime, though there were some issues that I had with it after kind of like thinking about it when I'd finished it. And I saw it on Netflix, I'm like, okay, I've heard about this, I want to give it a try. And at first I wasn't really even sure I wanted to finish it because in like the first episode, it had like kind of a serious tone talking about like the main character, Kosei Arama, losing his mother, and kind of like the abuse he had suffered under her, and that kind of affecting him to not play the piano for 2 years. And then him meeting this chick, Kaori, because him and his other friends were kind of like brought in to have like a kind of group date thing because they had heard that Kaori liked his one athletic friend, Watari, who plays soccer and all that, and Tsubaki was the one kind of like helping to set it up. And we get into the kind of the humor at that point once like Kosei meets her by himself because he like saw leggings and like shoes left in one place and then kind of like walks and hears this music and sees her and of course leads to some humorous situations, but it was just kind of disconnect from them. I don't know. And also I'm like, okay, the way this is going, it looks like she's probably going to die. And I mean, I called it, but I still kind of like went through the journey of seeing them kind of getting Kosei back into playing piano and everything. And we go deeper in that his mother was deathly sick and was pretty much trying to get him like to play the piano perfectly and all that. And every time he would make what she would deem a mistake, she'd like beat him. And at one point he did this concert and she would beat him with her cane and all that, and like he was bloody and everything. Like Jesus, and that gets into the one aspect that kind of like threw me for a loop because most of the humor is Tsubaki and Kaori hitting Kosei, and it's like that's kind of weird since you're dealing with him being physically abused by his mother, and then having kind of slapstick comedy of him getting like beaten by these two girls. Now, granted, it's not egregious, it's more like shin kicking and all that, but it was just really weird, didn't really gel and mesh with, like, I don't know what the tone was they were trying to go for. But I really kind of liked when they really started getting into the kind of piano stuff and everything, and just doing all the music and just kind of like getting in the headspace of like Kosei when he's doing it, trying to get him back in, like how he's fine, but then he starts to not be able to hear the music. And it's the mental block that the death of his mother caused and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was done pretty well. I wish that that had been more of the focus than trying to help balance that with like the romantic stuff of Tsubaki having feelings for Kosei and of course Kaori having feelings for Kosei, but granted we don't learn about that until at the end of the show. But we see him going through, he does a duet with Kaori because she ropes him into it and pretty much browbeats him to doing it. And of course he messes up in the middle, but where he stops because he can't hear anything, and she stops, but then they start back up again because he's focusing on her and getting kind of inspiration from her, and it goes over really well, but then of course she collapses, and we see like this whole sickness thing going on. It's like, okay, yeah, something bad's gonna happen here. You just skip the red flags a lot. And you're just like, okay, she's either gonna die or she's gonna come out alright. Like, we'll see what goes on. So, he's dealing with having feelings for her, but of course she's going out with Watari. And he's kind of like balancing between that, trying to like see if he needs to go to the hospital or not, and just her making sure that he keeps focusing on piano and doing stuff with that. And of course she was supposed to play with him again at this thing for the violinist, but she doesn't show up, but he still goes on and plays anyway, trying to pretty much reach her with his music. And of course then we get in the middle of the show and she's like dealing with the stuff at the hospital and all that, and pretty much doing stuff with Kosei as being like the substitute for Watari in a lot of situations. Like, okay. And then we get to a point where he was like doing stuff with his rivals, and they're like, oh, he's back on the scene and all that, and seeing them both pumped to kind of like try and like compete against him because he had left, and those were their only gauges. Takashi was the one who's like, he's his hero and wants to beat him. Emi was moved by him and still wants to beat him, but of course, when she was smaller, she saw his music and was affected and wanted to become a pianist. Same with Takashi, and Tsubaki was moved by him doing his recitals as well at a young age. And of course, this becomes a really big theme in that Tsubaki's pretty much in love with him. Emi is, if she isn't in love with him, she's really close to it or really, really likes him. And of course, we have Takashi in there having the kind of opposite reaction in that he not opposite, more like uses him as fuel to reach higher in his piano playing skills and everything and try and surpass his hero. And I think that those were pretty well done, though I think that they needed to be fleshed out more as well because those would have been really interesting aspects to dig into. Then we get into the kind of middle where it goes a little bit weird where I think that this should have more been put at the end. Because he then takes, well, his mom's friend that was like helping out comes back and like kind of gets him ready for competitions and all that. And then this one little girl wants her to teach her, but then she pawns him off on Kosei, and we find out that this is Takashi's little sister, and they do a duet thing, of course, at her school, and he's doing it for Kaori. It's kind of weird. It's more like, why is this going on? And of course she's listening in the hospital and everything, and we find out that she's getting worse and worse, and Kosei has his like last performance, and it's his best and all that, and he's like, she promised to have play another duet with him, but she goes in for surgery that's could save her life, but not. And I think it was pretty cool because they go into kind of like a time space where they're actually doing it in his head, and it's just them playing, but of course, we see that she like explodes into light at the end of that, showing that she's died from the surgery. And it's like, oh yeah, of course it was coming to that end. And we find out that she left a letter, and surprise, surprise, she left Kosei. Her lie was that she liked Watari, and she liked him because it was the same performance everybody else was. Now granted, I liked the idea of the whole confession letter and everything, but you have tied all of these characters liking him and loving him from that, like, one performance as a kid. It's like, you could have changed up some stuff, because Tsubaki's well done trying to fight for her feelings for Kosei, and it's like, okay, but then the rivals aren't as fleshed out as much as I would like. Watari is like a plot device, pretty much, that is just used so that Kosei and Kaori are not together at all. I'm like, okay. And it's just like, you could have done a little bit more with that. And I really like the letter because it laid out why Kaori did what she did, lying about liking Watari, because she knew she didn't have much time left. She knew that Tsubaki liked Kosei and didn't want to kind of like use her limited time just screwing up their whole friendship dynamic. But it kind of screwed up anyway because you confessed your feelings for Kosei, and if he had the same feelings, which of course he shows that he did, doing a sequence at the end, pretty much imagining himself in places talking to Kaori, saying that he wouldn't forget her and all that stuff, and that he loves her as well. And it's like, left at such a place because Tsubaki's like, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to make sure that you still play and you still have someone. We see Kosei smile at that, and it's like, they could have gotten together, but it's like, what if they didn't? It's just like, alright, Tsubaki needs to deal with that, and Kosei, you need to deal with that. Is it one of those things where they possibly, I don't know. It's left unresolved in a way that I don't need everything to be resolved, but it's more like, okay. And I liked the ending. I didn't mind. I could care less if they lived or died, but I mean, they had frickin' flagged the whole thing so far that it's like they kind of have to commit to it to have her died, because otherwise it almost seems like trolling. But it just felt like after thinking about it, because I was like, oh, okay, I liked going through this anime because it was more the journey than the destination, but then you get up the little nitpicks and it's like, well, not little nitpicks, but you've got your issues with it. It's like, alright, I like this anime, but it could have been done better. Because it almost felt like it was pushing and pulling between characters, moving the plot, and then the plot moving characters. So, I can't say that a big issue was that it was just completely, the plot demands! But there is an element of that in there which I tend to more lean towards. I would like a story to have it that the characters move the plot forward through their own actions rather than the plot demands that this dude say this thing or be this kind of asshole or be this kind of good guy and have this thing happen. And just know that it's like this person is only doing A because the plot demands that they do A to get to point B. So it was kind of like a mishmash of things that I'm like, okay, I've got my issues with it, but I still enjoyed it. So if you're into kind of the like high school, middle school kind of stuff, slice of life things, I think you'd enjoy this. There's not as much character development as I usually like, but it's not completely like two cardboard cutouts talking to each other with no development whatsoever. So I would overall think that if you're into this kind of genre of anime, you'd have a good time with it. Now just be ready because it's more of a sad one, and I mean there's still some good humor and everything, but if you're into those kind of like sad endings and everything, you'll be okay with this one. So those are my opinions on the anime. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.